August 15, 1977, Graceland. Elvis Presley stood by the stairs, suitcase in hand, ready to board his private jet for another tour. Before leaving, he slipped a gold ring from his finger and placed it in his daughter's palm. "For luck, baby," he said with a smile. 2 days later, the king was gone, and the ring story was just beginning. Graceland, Memphis, August 15, 1977. The morning air was heavy and warm, thick with the hum of cicadas. Inside the white-columned mansion, the smell of coffee and fried bacon drifted through the halls. Staff members moved quietly, packing luggage and checking flight times. Elvis Presley was scheduled to leave for Portland, Maine that afternoon, the first stop of what was supposed to be another sold-out tour. But this morning felt different. Joe Esposito, Elvis's longtime friend and bodyguard, later said he'd never seen the singer so calm. "He had this quiet look in his eyes," Joe recalled, "like he knew something the rest of us didn't." Elvis sat at the kitchen table in his robe, sipping black coffee. His daughter, Lisa Marie, padded in wearing pink pajamas, clutching a small stuffed bear. She was 9 years old, sleepy, curious, radiant in that way only children can be. He smiled when he saw her. "Mornin', Peanut." She climbed onto his lap. "You leavin' again, Daddy?" He nodded slowly. "Just for a few days. Daddy's got to sing." From his finger, he slipped off a thick gold ring, the one fans had seen in every photo from his Vegas shows, the one he called his lucky charm. The stone caught the light, a deep blue sparkle surrounded by tiny diamonds. He pressed it into her small hand. "Keep this for me while I'm gone. For luck." Lisa frowned. "But you need it." He smiled gently. "I got all the luck I need right here," he said, touching her heart. Joe, standing nearby, pretended to busy himself with luggage, but the scene etched itself into his memory. There was this hush, he'd later tell reporters, like even the air in the room didn't want to move. Elvis looked tired, but peaceful. Not the restless energy of a performer on the move, but the stillness of a man saying goodbye to something only he could sense. He bent down and whispered something in Lisa's ear. She nodded, serious, as if she understood. No one ever learned exactly what he said. When she left the room, Elvis stared after her for a long time, twirling his now bare finger. "Joe," he said quietly, "funny thing, feels strange not wearing it." Joe laughed. "Guess that's what happens when you give away your luck." Elvis smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the point." Later that morning, he walked through the halls of Graceland, humming softly. The sound of his voice echoed off the marble floor. Every few steps, he paused to glance at old family photos, his parents, his first car, Lisa's baby pictures. The man who had everything suddenly looked like someone trying to remember what mattered most. Out on the front lawn, fans had already gathered by the gates, holding signs and flowers. A few shouted his name as he waved from the steps. He signed one autograph, the last one anyone would ever get in person. Before he climbed into the car, he turned toward the house one more time. For a second, he seemed frozen there. One hand on the railing, the other shading his eyes from the sunlight. Inside, Lisa was at the window watching him go. She pressed her palm to the glass, the ring still warm in her hand. As the car pulled away, Joe glanced in the rearview mirror. "You all right, boss?" he asked. Elvis didn't answer at first. He just looked out the window, lost in thought. Then he said softly, "You ever get the feeling you just finished something you didn't know was ending?" Joe frowned. "What do you mean?" Elvis turned to him, smiling faintly. "Nothing. Just a thought." He leaned back in his seat, eyes half closed. The sunlight flickered across his face as the gates of Graceland disappeared behind them. What would you have done if you were there? If you'd watched a legend hand away his luck like it meant nothing at all? The car disappeared down Elvis Presley Boulevard, heading for Memphis International Airport. No one realized it yet, but that quiet morning goodbye, the gift, the whisper, the ring, would soon become one of the most haunting mysteries in music history. Memphis International Airport, August 15, 1977. The tarmac shimmered under a thick summer haze. Reporters later said you could feel the heat rising off the concrete like invisible smoke. Elvis's private jet, the Lisa Marie, gleamed beneath the sun, its blue and white body polished to a mirror shine. Crew members loaded the last of the luggage while Joe Esposito walked beside his boss, clipboard in hand. Everything set for Portland, E? Elvis nodded. He wore a simple white jumpsuit and carried his overnight bag himself. No entourage this time, no spectacle. Just a man about to do what he'd done 1,000 times before. Take flight. Still, something in his walk was slower, deliberate. As they approached the steps, a gust of wind tugged at Elvis's jacket sleeve. He paused and glanced down at his bare hand. The finger that had once worn the sapphire ring looked strangely empty. Joe noticed the gesture. "You keep reaching for that thing." Elvis smiled faintly. "Habit. Lisa still got it?" "She's got it. Told her to take care of it for me." Joe chuckled. "Reckon she'll guard it tighter than the Secret Service." Elvis's smile faded. "I hope she does." Inside the jet, the cabin hummed with soft air conditioning and the faint smell of leather and jet fuel. Elvis settled into his favorite seat near the window. His pilot, Ron Strauss, leaned in from the cockpit. "We'll be wheels up in 5, sir." Elvis nodded, eyes on the clouds forming beyond the glass. As the engines roared to life, Joe strapped in across from him. "You look deep in thought, boss. Everything okay?" Elvis tilted his head. "You ever feel like something's coming? Like, you can't see it, but you know it's there?" Joe laughed nervously. "You're making me nervous talking like that." Elvis smiled, but his eyes didn't. "Don't worry, it's just one of those feelings." The jet began to taxi down the runway. Fans gathered behind the fence, waving small flags and signs. Some shouted his name, their voices lost in the roar of the engines. Elvis lifted his hand and gave one last wave through the window. As the plane lifted off, the Memphis skyline fell away. Below, Graceland grew smaller, a white speck surrounded by endless green. For a long while, no one spoke. The hum of the engines filled the silence. Then, faintly, from the seat behind Joe, someone began humming. At first, it was soft, barely audible. Then it grew clearer. It was Elvis. Unchained melody. The melody floated through the cabin, low and slow. His voice was fragile, tender. Nothing like the powerful sound that filled arenas. Joe froze, listening. It wasn't a rehearsal. It wasn't for show. It was a goodbye. Elvis stopped mid-verse, then looked out the window again. Joe whispered, "You all right, E?" Elvis turned his head slightly, eyes far away. "That song's been following me," he said quietly. "Feels like it's waiting on something." The flight to Portland lasted barely 2 hours, but every minute seemed stretched thin with something unspoken. When they landed, Elvis stood by the open door, staring at the gray clouds gathering on the horizon. The air smelled like rain. "Looks like a storm's coming," Joe said. Elvis didn't answer. He pulled out a small notepad from his bag and scribbled something before tucking it back into his pocket. Joe asked, "What's that?" Elvis smiled. "Just a reminder." As he stepped off the plane, a flash of lightning flickered in the distance. Silent, far away. Witnesses would later remember that when he walked down those stairs, his head was bowed slightly, like a man carrying something invisible but heavy. That night, in his Portland hotel suite, Elvis placed a phone call home to Graceland. Lisa answered. He asked if she still had the ring. She said yes. He told her, "Good. Don't take it off till I get back." Then he said something strange. "If it shines brighter, you'll know I'm thinking about you." The line crackled. She laughed. "It's already shiny, Daddy." He chuckled softly. "Then I must be thinking about you a lot." It was the last conversation they would ever have. And when Lisa hung up the phone that night, the ring in her hand glowed faintly under the lamplight, as if holding a heartbeat of its own. Graceland, August 16th, 1977. The morning began like any other Memphis summer day, humid, bright, still. But inside the mansion, something felt off. The air was too quiet, too heavy, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Lisa Marie sat cross-legged on the carpet of her room. The gold ring looped around a string on her neck. It clicked softly each time she moved. Downstairs, the sound of distant voices, maids talking, phones ringing, echoed faintly. At exactly 2:30 p.m., everything changed. A scream, then running footsteps. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, shouted for help. "Call an ambulance." Lisa froze, clutching the ring so hard it left an imprint on her palm. She didn't know yet, but her father had collapsed upstairs in his bathroom. Minutes later, sirens wailed through the gates of Graceland. Fans waiting outside pressed against the fences, confused, terrified. Word spread faster than reason. Something had happened to the king. Inside, chaos ruled. Joe Esposito followed the paramedics, voice breaking as he shouted directions. "He's in here, hurry." They tried everything. CPR, oxygen, desperation. But the silence that followed was unbearable. At 3:30 p.m., the doctor lowered his head. The words came out barely above a whisper. "He's gone." The mansion fell into stillness. Joe staggered into the hallway, hands trembling. "Somebody tell Mr. Vernon," he murmured. Lisa, unaware of the finality, peeked around the corner just in time to see the stretcher being rolled through the hallway. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just clutched the ring tighter. Hours later, the news spread across America like a shockwave. Radio stations interrupted music with the announcement. Elvis Presley has died today at his Memphis home. Crowds began forming outside Graceland within the hour, hundreds, then thousands. By nightfall, candles flickered along the walls, fans weeping openly, some singing "Love Me Tender" through tears. Inside, Lisa sat by the window, staring out at the sea of strangers who seemed to love the same man she just lost. She whispered, "Daddy, why didn't the ring work?" Her grandmother, Minnie May, tried to comfort her, wrapping her arms around the small, trembling child. "It wasn't supposed to keep him here, honey," she said softly. "It was supposed to keep him with you." Outside, the night thundered. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the mansion's white columns. Lisa stared down at the ring. The blue stone glowed faintly in the lightning's reflection. For a moment, she thought she saw movement, like a shimmer beneath the surface, a flicker of gold light dancing inside. She gasped and called out, "Grandma, look!" But when Minnie May turned, the glow had faded. Maybe it was grief, maybe imagination, or maybe, just maybe, it was something else. By midnight, tens of thousands of people filled Elvis Presley Boulevard. The crowd sang softly in unison, their voices rising like a prayer. "Love me tender, love me true." Upstairs, Lisa pressed the ring to her heart and closed her eyes. She didn't understand the world's mourning yet. To her, the crowds were strangers claiming pieces of a man she'd known simply as Daddy. At dawn, as the sky began to pale, she whispered to the empty room, "If you can hear me, sing to me." The room was silent, but from somewhere outside, faint and distant, the notes of a piano drifted through the open window. Someone was playing Unchained Melody. Her eyes opened. "Daddy?" she whispered. No one answered, but the sound lingered, just long enough for her to believe. Years later, she would say she could still remember that exact moment. The soft hum, the cool air, the flickering sound of a song floating through the walls. Whether it was memory or miracle didn't matter, because from that day on, Lisa never took off the ring again. And every time she looked at it, she swore she saw it pulse, like it still had a heartbeat left inside it. 1 year later, August 1978, Graceland had become a shrine. Thousands of people still visited every week, leaving flowers, scarves, letters, even toy guitars along the gate. The mansion felt alive and silent all at once. Inside, the Presley family was still learning how to breathe again. Lisa Marie, now 10, had started wearing her father's ring on a chain around her neck. The gold hadn't tarnished. The stone hadn't dulled. It was as if time had skipped over it completely. Her grandmother noticed one afternoon as sunlight hit the pendant. The sapphire shimmered with a faint golden hue. "That thing still shines like the day he gave it to you," she whispered. Lisa smiled softly. "It feels warm sometimes. Warm. Like he's still holding it." Her grandmother said nothing. She just touched Lisa's hair and let the child believe what adults could no longer explain. That same week, Joe Esposito returned to Graceland for a private visit. He hadn't stepped foot inside since the funeral. The weight of memories pressed against him at every turn. The laughter in the kitchen, the echo of footsteps on the marble stairs. When he saw Lisa, she ran to him. "Uncle Joe, look!" She held up the ring. Joe smiled, but his eyes filled. "He told me about that," he said quietly. "Said you'd take care of it better than he ever did." Lisa looked at it closely. "It still shines, even when it's dark." Joe nodded slowly. "Then maybe that means he's still watching over you." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The house creaked softly in the afternoon stillness. Later, Joe joined Vernon Presley and a few staff members in the living room. Over coffee, he brought up something strange. "That ring, y'all ever notice it don't fade? Gold's supposed to change after a while, especially with skin oil." Vernon sighed. "Nothing about my boy ever followed the rules." They laughed, but the sound didn't last long. In the months that followed, stories began to spread among the staff. A maid claimed she'd seen light flicker near Lisa's room late at night, like candlelight moving on its own. Another swore she'd heard a low hum, like someone humming unchained melody through the walls. Lisa didn't tell anyone, but sometimes when she was alone, she'd whisper to the ring before bed, "Daddy, can you hear me?" And in the quiet, she'd feel a warmth against her chest, small, steady, like a heartbeat. At school, kids would ask about her necklace. "Is that real gold?" She'd smile. "It's more than that." By 1982, Graceland had opened to the public. Tour guides told stories of Elvis's generosity, his faith, his final concerts. But none mentioned the ring. Only family knew that secret stayed close to Lisa's heart, literally and figuratively. That summer, a young archivist named Anne Hughes joined the Graceland preservation team. She was meticulous, curious, and deeply respectful of the legend she was preserving. During one inventory session, she asked Vernon about notable artifacts that weren't on display. He mentioned the ring in passing. "Lisa keeps it close," he said. "But one day maybe it'll rest here in the collection when she's ready," and smiled. "I'll mark it as private." But something in his tone made her wonder what was so special about a piece of jewelry. That evening, as she left the house, she noticed Lisa sitting alone on the back porch, watching the sunset. The pendant glowed softly in the orange light. "It's beautiful," Anne said gently. Lisa nodded. "It used to be Daddy's," and hesitated. "Does it make you sad to wear it?" Lisa shook her head. "No. It keeps him close," and smiled. "Then maybe that's what it was made for." In 1990, when Lisa was grown, she decided to store the ring in Graceland's private archive for safekeeping. The chain had finally worn thin, but the ring itself looked untouched. No scratches, no fading, not even a trace of dust. As the curator sealed it inside a velvet-lined case, Lisa whispered, "Thank you." She didn't explain who she was talking to. That night, the security cameras caught something odd. At exactly 2:30 a.m., the time Elvis had been pronounced dead 13 years earlier, the light in the archive hallway flickered once, then steadied. When guards reviewed the footage, they noticed a faint glint from inside the case. Just a flicker, like a pulse of light reflecting from nowhere. Some called it a malfunction. Others said the king was checking in. Joe Esposito, in one of his final interviews before his death, was asked if he believed in the story. He smiled gently. "I saw that ring the day he gave it away. I saw it again years later. And I'll tell you this, Elvis had a habit of giving people things that carried a piece of him. Maybe that's why the shine never went out." He paused, his eyes glassy. "Maybe it's because Lisa never stopped believing." Every August since, fans leave small gold rings at the gates of Graceland. Some polished, some old, some toy jewelry from children who never met him. The security guards don't remove them. They just let them rest there under the iron arch, catching the morning sun. And when the light hits just right, all those little rings glow together, like sparks of something eternal. Maybe that's coincidence. Or maybe it's love refusing to fade. But one thing was certain. Elvis's last gift wasn't luck. It was a promise. And that promise was still shining. Graceland Archives, Spring 1992. 15 years had passed since the king's final goodbye. The velvet-lined case sat untouched inside the private family vault, sealed behind tempered glass and quiet air. Most of the staff had changed, but one familiar name still appeared on the duty roster. And Hughes, the archivist who'd once watched a little girl hold her father's ring like a heartbeat. That morning she'd been assigned to audit the private collection Presley heirlooms. Nothing unusual. Catalog numbers, photographs, humidity checks. But when she opened drawer 7, she noticed a faint shimmer through the protective wrap. The ring. It hadn't dimmed. If anything, the sapphire burned brighter under the archive light, like captured flame, and smiled despite herself. Still shining, she whispered. Following protocol, she logged its condition: gold, no oxidation. Stone. Intact. Internal reflection detected. But curiosity tugged at her. Professional curiosity, she told herself. She wanted to know why it never aged. She slipped on cotton gloves, lifted the ring carefully, and placed it under the magnifier. Then she froze. Inside the inner band, so fine you could miss it without light, were letters etched by hand. First, they looked like scratches. But as she adjusted the focus, the words emerged. If I'm gone, remember the music was for you. Her breath caught. She whispered, My God! He left her a message, and called Lisa Marie that evening. I think you need to come down here, she said quietly. Lisa arrived just before closing time, wearing dark glasses and a simple black jacket. She hadn't been to the archive in months, and guided her to the table, the ring resting beneath a reading lamp. I found something. Lisa leaned closer. When she saw the engraving, her hand went to her mouth. If I'm gone, remember the music was for you. She didn't speak. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the letters. After a moment, she whispered, He must have done this himself, and nodded. Probably the same night he gave it to you. The etching's old. Looks done with a pocket knife or pin. Lisa sat down slowly. He always said the songs were prayers he didn't know how to speak. I thought it was just words. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the air vent, and placed a hand on hers. You don't have to share this with anyone. Lisa shook her head. No, this wasn't for the world. This was for me. That night, after everyone left, Lisa lingered alone in the archive. She switched off the overhead lights, letting only the desk lamp burn. The ring glowed softly, its reflection trembling on the glass. She thought about that morning in 1977, the robe, the coffee, his gentle voice calling her Peanut. The way he'd pressed the ring into her hand like a secret he couldn't say out loud. For the first time in years, she didn't cry. She just whispered, I heard you, Daddy. Then she did something that surprised even herself. She slipped the ring back on her finger. It fit perfectly. The gold felt warm, alive. A faint hum filled the room, so low she thought it was her imagination. But the desk lamp flickered once, exactly at 2:30 a.m. She smiled through tears, still right on time. Weeks later, a journalist from the Memphis Press caught wind of a mysterious new inscription found on one of Elvis's personal items. Calls flooded Graceland asking for confirmation. The estate refused to comment, and Lisa released a short handwritten statement. Some messages are meant for the heart, not for headlines. It became one of the most quoted lines in fan circles, simple, graceful, final. But privately, she decided to display the ring one last time. August 1997, 20th anniversary memorial inside Graceland's new museum wing. Under a glass dome surrounded by lilies and candlelight, the ring rested on a black velvet pedestal. A small card beneath it read, The lucky ring, a father's gift to his daughter. No mention of the engraving. No mention of luck. Visitors filed past in reverent silence. Some gasped softly when the sapphire caught the light. Others swore they saw it pulse once, faint but real, when Lisa quietly touched the glass. A young boy in the crowd tugged his mother's sleeve. "Mama, is that magic?" She smiled gently. "No, baby. That's love." In the years that followed, the story of the ring became legend. Fans left letters saying the message changed them, that they listened to Elvis differently now, that the music somehow sounded more human. Even music historians began referring to his later songs as letters to Lisa, believing the discovery reframed his final recordings. But for Lisa, it was simpler than that. It wasn't about legend or legacy. It was about a father who couldn't find peace until his daughter knew he'd meant every word he ever sang. Today, if you stand near the glass case at sunset, the light hits the stone at just the right angle. For a few seconds, the inscription glows bright enough to read without magnification. "If I'm gone, remember the music was for you." It's not carved deep, just enough to catch the light. Enough to be found when the time was right. Every August 16th, Lisa returns quietly to the mansion. No cameras, no press, just her, the ring, and the echo of a song that never really ended. She lays her palm on the glass and whispers, "I still remember." Outside, a crowd of thousands sings "Love Me Tender" in candlelight. Their voices drift through the summer air, up the hill, and into the room where the ring gleams softly, its reflection dancing like flame. If you listen close, you can almost hear a faint baritone hum joining them. Maybe it's memory, maybe it's faith, maybe it's the king keeping his promise. Whatever it is, it still shines. The lights dim, and the screen fills with the quiet glow of Graceland at night. Candlelight ripples across the iron gates. 1,000 voices hum softly in the dark. Somewhere inside, the ring still rests under glass, unchanged by years, by grief, by time. The gold hasn't dulled. The words inside it haven't faded. "If I'm gone, remember the music was for you." It was never just a message for one girl. It was for everyone who ever felt saved by a song. Elvis sang of love and loss, of faith and forgiveness, but this was his truest verse. Not performed, not rehearsed, whispered, carved, left behind for the world to find only when it was ready to listen. Maybe that's why the story haunts people still. Because it isn't about a ring or a legend. It's about a father trying to say what millions struggle to find the words for. He gave away his luck that morning, but in doing so, he left behind something far greater than superstition. He left proof that love outlasts even silence. Every August, when the candles rise and the crowd begins to sing, the echo of that love hums through the air. If you stand by the gate, you might feel it. A warmth on your palm, a pulse that seems to come from nowhere. It's not a ghost. It's gratitude, because the king's voice never really left. It just found a quieter stage. If the story moved you, share it with someone who still believes music can heal. Do you think the ring's glow was coincidence or something greater? Tell us below and let the echo keep going. Because legends end in silence only when we stop listening. And this one, the still singing. The camera drifts above the mansion. The candles below blur into a constellation of gold light. Somewhere, faintly, a piano begins to play unchained melody. A single line appears on screen. Elvis Presley, August 16th, 1977. Gone, but never silent. Then the narrator's voice returns, soft and steady. Every story leaves an echo. This one began with a gift. Just a ring, just a promise, but it carried through generations. The music, the words, the faith. All of it still rings somewhere between those walls. Cut to close-ups. The ring's reflection on glass. The gates opening at dawn. A crowd still waiting decades later. People say time heals. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe time just teaches us how to keep listening. A pause. The piano stops. Only the quiet hum of crickets and night air. And if you ever visit Graceland, stand still. You might hear him too, not as a legend, but as a man who loved deeply enough to leave proof. Fade to black. If you stayed to the end, the story's yours now, carry it forward. Watch the next untold moment from Graceland. The fan who caught Elvis's final song on tape,